Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I was able to add an amendment to the intelligence authorization, and I think you're aware of it, those of you at State, to create a terrorist tracking system, and particularly given what we heard from Ms. Hill today, it seems to me just stupefying to hear today that a year after 9/11, discussions are essentially only underway. I mean, that's how it's constantly described. I mean, discussions are underway. But here, Ms. Hill today has outlined all of the problems that were associated with some of the past failures. In the intelligence authorization, the leadership of this committee worked very closely with me so that we're trying to do it in legislation. And I think the question I would ask Mr. Kojim is, what is it going to take to actually get this done? I mean, we've got the documented failures. We've got a bipartisan effort in this committee to be supportive of your agency and others. And I think I'd like to begin by having you all just give me a sense of what is it going to take to actually get this done?
Senator, thank you for your question. I think the short answer, with all due respect, Senator, is funds, and the department does not have them. Consular Affairs has funded this program almost in its totality from the outset. It does not have the funds to provide for this purpose. For this reason, the senior leadership at the Department of State is seeking funds from elsewhere, from the DCI. And we believe that will be forthcoming. But beyond that, I really can't speak in detail.
I think that is a legitimate concern, but when I heard Eleanor Hill this morning, and I've discussed it in the past, I've not had cited as the primary reason for this a lack of funds. I mean, what we heard this morning is that it just seems like somehow the left hand is reluctant to share with the right hand, or they simply don't know about it. I'll be very supportive of the request for additional funds. But I will tell you, the more I learn about this, the more convinced I am that there are a set of forces operating in the various agencies that have responsibilities here, in the law enforcement and intelligence agency. And I'm just committed to getting at the bottom of this so it happens. You have a commitment on my part, and I know from others, for the necessary financial support. But I didn't get the sense, listening to Ms. Hill, that the central problem was funds. When you talk about a national lookout center, how would that work, and what agencies and levels of government ought to have access to this information?
Senator, thank you. I think to help in responding to your question, it's useful to just enumerate how tiny the tip-off program is. We're talking about 5 federal employees, 6 full-time contractors, 3 part-time contractors, and some computer support people. It is a tiny program. To fulfill the purpose that you have stated, and that which we believe it needs to fulfill as well, it needs to become a much larger entity. And it needs to have representation from other agencies. As my colleagues have spoken about how it's so critically important for FBI and CIA to live and work with each other, we believe as well that for a national watch list center to work effectively, it would need representation from CIA, FBI, NSA, Transportation Security Administration, FAA, Immigration and Naturalization Service, Coast Guard, probably other agencies that I haven't named.
How many more people do you think are needed to do this right?
It is a planning figure. It is. If our current number is 11, it would be several times that number. Probably less than 100, but it would be considerably more than now work. And I hope I've made clear in my testimony that this small number of people cannot do 24/7 work, and that is one of the initial requirements, that we need to have a 24/7 presence rather than calling in people as we do now at every odd hour to come in and handle a case.
With the passage of the legislation, and as you know, we consulted with a variety of the agencies that you mentioned, how soon could we get this in place, particularly if the funds are forthcoming?
Well, planning is underway. We do believe that within a year, certainly within 2, we can have a center that we believe is equal to the task.
Well, I hope so, because I know that when I went home after we dealt with the authorization and people would ask what was going on, and I said I had worked very closely with my colleagues on a terrorist tracking system, and essentially something that really sort of very much is structured along the lines of tip-off. They say, good job, Ron. Why do we need something like that? Why wasn't something like that in place, say, by December 1st, a few months after September 11th? And it is very hard to give an answer to that question, and particularly when you listen to some of the comments of Ms. Hill today, who basically took sort of step by step how somehow some of these people who could inflict such harm on this country somehow fell between the cracks. And you're forced to conclude that we just can't make the wheels of government, with all of the inertia that seems to accompany it, so often work very well. And I want it understood that I'm very much committed to your getting the resources that you need. I hope that you will continue to work with us to try to refine the legislation, because in effect our TIC system is on all fours with what is now considered the tip-off program. And I want to leave here this session with a sense of how, on a date certain, we're going to have this expanded program in place. Because to hear Ms. Hill, to hear what we heard today, with Ms. Hill outlining all the problems, and then to juxtapose that alongside the testimony, well, discussions are underway. I just think we've got to work together and do better. And I'm committed to making sure that the Congress gets you the tools, and you give us your sense of what it's going to take to get an expanded program in place quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.